Res Radio's on the air. I'm Dave Archuleta. Well, this is Reporter's Notebook for May 14th, 2026. And today I'm going to be telling you a story about when I was 12 years old. And this actually started out as a letter to the editor to a gentleman by the name of Perry Swisher. Now, Perry Swisher was a longtime journalist. Then he became a state senator. From there, he ran for lieutenant governor. And then he served on the Idaho Public Utilities Commission until his retirement. Well, anyway, the reason I wrote that letter to the editors, this is what I said. I wanted to thank Perry Swisher for an event which happened on March 27th, 1968, which was a life-changing experience for myself, to say the least. So anyway, the reason I remembered that was I took my 13-year-old grandson, his name is Andreas Garza, to the Pocatello Marshall Library, and what we're doing is we're doing some research into the archives, the newspaper archives. So I was showing him how to research using old newspapers. So I decided to look up when Robert Kennedy visited Idaho State University. Now, in those days, Pocatello, Idaho was Idaho's second largest city and was an important stop for anyone running for president of the United States, both Democrats and Republicans. So here's where Perry Swisher comes into the story. And first of all, Perry was a Republican. My family were Democrats. And strangely, Perry Swisher was a friend of my family's. No surprise, because our family on both sides had wide, diverse series of friends and range of friends. Well, my uncle, Vince Mira, had a bar called the Denver Bar on Center Street in Pocatello. It was one of those, quote, famous East Side Indian bars where he'd actually have live music and bands there. And that once the band was over, the bars would close and the party would continue at someone's house. Now, Perry was one of those people who went to the parties because he hung out these East Side Indian bars. Not only that, the what was called bootlegging joints in those days. There were several people that had bootlegging joints, and people would go there and drink beer after hours and stuff like that. So those were the bootlegging places, and Perry was one of those that actually hung out with natives and Mexicans in those days. So Perry's one of those people who actually knew everyone, and he went everywhere and spoke to everyone, and young and old alike. And he would, what I'd call today, to be a statesman. He'd bridged all social groups, and he'd treat everyone like you were the most important person in the room as he was talking to you. So Perry ran for lieutenant governor one year, but he lost, and that was actually Idaho's loss. So back to the story. Senator Robert F. Kennedy from New York was running for president of the United States, and he had spent the day touring the Fort Hall Indian Reservation. He even stopped at Willis Dixie's house. Now, this is true because when I was at Choban News, I wrote a story about it and actually had a picture in there that Willis Dixie had provided showing Robert Kennedy sitting on his porch eating veggie beans. Now, for those of you who don't know what veggie beans are, back in the old days, and even today, the USDA had a program called the Commodity Program, and that's where excess food was canned into cans and then given to people on Indian reservations or poor people in town. So and veggie beans were like I'd say like pork and beans, except without the pork. So there was Robert F. Kennedy sitting on Willis Dixie's front porch, eating veggie beans. Wow. So anyway, when I was 12 years old, when I was a 12-year-old kid, the November before that, on November 27th, 1967, my dad had got killed. And he was killed in a trench cave-in. And I tell you, for a 12-year-old, that's really traumatic. That was a bad day for me. I was actually selling the Idaho State Journal on the streets in those days. And I picked up the headlines that day, and it said Pocatello man killed, construction worker from Pocatello was killed in a cave-in. and it didn't identify him, but I knew who it was once I got home, and I saw the priest and everyone at my house, so I knew that was Dad. So anyway, getting back to the story, I was in Mrs. K. Burke's sixth grade class at Bonneville Elementary, and I always followed the news because, again, I had to read the front page of the newspaper so I knew what was going on, because people would ask me, what's in the news today, when I'd sell them a newspaper. So I used to talk to Perry, and he used to talk to me like I was an adult, and that's how I learned to talk to kids, is I just treat them like they do have a brain. And so anyway, he knew I followed politics and knew who Robert Kennedy was. Well, Perry asked me if I wanted to go see and hear Robert Kennedy at Idaho State University. I was ecstatic. Imagine this young kid having a chance to see his idol, where other kids had their idols as movie stars and rock stars. I was into politics, and having a chance to see Robert Kennedy was like getting to see Obama today. Now, remember, I wrote this a while back, and I actually did see Obama later on that year, and I do have a picture to prove that as well. So, a person like Robert Kennedy you want to meet because he can lead people and has charisma. Well, I was telling Andreas how it was back then, how people wanted to see their leaders and touch their leaders and shake their hands and just be near them. It was a time that people actually believed in their leaders, and life was so much simpler in those days. Well, anyway, Perry got permission from my mom, and he picked me up and he gave me a ride to Reed Gymnasium. It was packed. It was wall-to-wall people. I saw some local famous people, including people like John and Idaho Person and others. And I never saw so many people in one place at one time in my lifetime. It was exciting. Imagine this, the floor was covered by seats and people in their seats, and the bleachers were packed, both sides. I mean, I'd never seen anything like that. And I'd been to school assemblies, but nothing like this. So anyway, Perry took me to the front row and told me to sit there. No matter what anyone else says to you, you stay there. So I think he just wanted to be able to find me after the speech. Well, Perry went off to visit other folks, being the politician he was. And so we waited for a long time for Kennedy to get there because he was delayed in Ford Hall. Well, Kennedy came into the room. Everyone was screaming, and the whole crowd went wild. They were on their feet and they're cheering, and Kennedy was surrounded by the media. Now, in those days, there was flash bulbs going off, and they had these big, huge cameras that they used to carry with its own light source, of course, and those are film cameras. Well, anyway, imagine that was just totally exciting for 12-year-old Dave, As excited, I was, as Kennedy moved from the front of the hall to where I was at, he got to the press section, noticed me sitting there in what was designated as the press section. Now, several reporters had tried to get me to move, but I was a 12-year-old kid who was going to obey the adult who brought me there and told me to stay there. So anyway, Kennedy noticed me, and he asked me what my name was. And I told him David Archuleta, and he asked, well, how old are you, David? And so I answered, I'm 12 years old. And he told me, well, I have a son named David who's your age. My response is he here? Can I play with him? Well, anyway, Kennedy responded that he is at home and hadn't made the trip with him. So he told me to stay where I was at. Well, he went up to give his speech. Well, Kennedy went up to the stage and gave one of the most powerful speeches I'd ever seen up till that time. I was totally amazed and mesmerized. That speech is actually on YouTube, and you can go to Robert Kennedy Visits ISU. It's a story that was done by my friend Jake Putnam. So go check that out, and you'll actually be able to see the speech. When he finished his speech, he came back down to where I was sitting, and he said, why don't you walk out with me? There I was, this poor Indian Mexican kid walking out of Reed Gymnasium with Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who may have been the next president of the United States. Wow, can you imagine that? People crowded all around him, shaking his hands, touching his suit, and the love the people showed him was great. They had real affection for him and were honored to be there with him. They also had a real affection for him and Kennedy for the people. They were really honored to be there with him, and I truly believe that Senator Kennedy really cared about the people, minorities, and those less fortunate than him and his family, since that's something you can't fake. It's either real or it's not, and he was the real deal. So anyway, I walked him out to his car, and when we got to his car, he grabbed a sign from someone and he signed it for me. And I really appreciate that. I should have asked him for a ride home because I couldn't find Perry, so I ended up walking home. I imagine poor Perry is freaking out losing his friend's 12-year-old kid. And of course, that didn't enter my mind at all. I was walking on cloud nine until I got home. Grounded. Yeah, Mom's response to me coming home very late was, "You're grounded." I tried to explain to her that the senator was late. "No, you go to bed." So I did. So I was ungrounded after Perry Swisher had a chance to explain to Mom that Kennedy was late and had lost me. And so the main reason I'm telling you this story is twofold. First, I'd like to thank Perry Swisher for taking me to see my hero, Robert F. Kennedy. And second, for having the vision and forethought to let a 12-year-old kid live and experience one of the best days of his life. Now, I don't think I ever told that story to anyone other than Andreas, and I also thank Andreas for letting your old uncle tell him his old school stories to you. And you're a good listener, and I know that you have many exciting times that you're going to be able to pass on to your next generation. By the way, I was very proud of your accomplishments so far, like you playing Little League football and then going to high school, playing football there, and then semi-pro with your signature move of being able to tackle two guys at a time and being a real cool kid and a fantastic man that you are today. So just a little background on myself. I'm Dave Archuleta. I was started in radio at 16 at Kissin Radio as a radio announcer. I went through high school at Pocatello High School, the home of the Indians. And then after high school, I was in ROTC, Navy ROTC, for all the time I was in high school. So after high school, I joined the U.S. Navy, and I served on the last U.S. warship out of Vietnam called the USS Benjamin Stoddert. After Vietnam, then I came home. I started Idaho State University and found out that I was more of a party boy instead of actually a student. So I went to work instead for the tribes and became a public relations guy, and then they sent me to Bailey School of Broadcast. And at Bailey School of Broadcast, and I worked while I was at Bailey at a radio station in Seattle called KKFX Radio. So after I got out of broadcast school, I went back to Pocatello, where I became news director for KKFX Radio. Well, excuse me, that was Seattle KKFX. Then I came home and I was a news director for KKLB Radio, and then later moved on to Chauvin News, where I wrote a lot of cool stories and was able to meet a lot of neat people. After that, I was recruited into tribal court. Well, while I was at Chauvin News, I also was able to be a correspondent for National Native News, and I later had the opportunity to host National Native News on NPR radio. And so after that, then I got recruited into the tribal court, where I was a chief public defender advocate, and then become a associate tribal judge for 12 years at both Fort Hall and the Wind River Indian Reservation in Wyoming. So that's your Res Radio for today. Res Radio is off the air. See you later.